Modern Mosaic Arts in Danbury, Connecticut, and I do mainly architectural installation work for commercial and residential clients. And I chose this project to talk about because I wanted to show you something that was very challenging and had a lot of issues, technical issues, so that I could explain how I deal with some of those types of problems, or how I dealt with it with this particular project. And then let you guys ask questions afterwards. If you find, though, that I'm talking too fast or there's something not clear about what I'm talking about, you can type in the chat box, and Emily, who is monitoring the chat, will stop me and ask me to clarify. So if I'm going too quickly or don't understand what I'm talking about, please ask me questions, okay? So here we go. So this project came to me through my website, and the client wanted me to create a marble incised floor inlaid with gold tile. It was an architect, and he had attempted to do it himself using Smalty, not really understanding that Smalty is all different heights, and that to get a flat floor with Smalty, he had to go about it in a certain way. And he also didn't really understand how to incise marble. So he had there were a lot of issues. And what I do whenever I take on an architectural project or even start thinking about it, I start making a list on a pad of paper next to me, and there's a positive and a negative, and I start writing the things down, because sometimes when you take on architectural projects, especially if they're last minute or they're confusing or there's something you've never dealt with before, it's really, sometimes you really don't want to take it. And this was one of those projects that I was like, do we really want this project? So anyway, basically the issues to consider that were, the negative issues were that he did not speak English very well. So I had a hard time understanding a lot of what the client was asking me to do. And he did have a lot of materials that he emailed to me, a lot of photographs. He had been photographing what he was attempting to do, and he had a lot of drawings that he was sending me. And this is basically a penthouse, or it was a building in Soho, a 6-story building that had been cut up into apartments. And the top 2 floors, they wanted to create this really stunning marble floor that this architect had designed. But he realized, like I said, quickly that he was in over his head. So that's when he called us, or me. And at the time, I had a woman working with me that was a good friend, so that was great. She was wonderful. So anyway, but the client wants to do this design that's really complicated. It's like the amount of gold I have on it that you see now is half of what he had proposed. And he wants to use his own marble contractor to do the incising, and then set the marble into the floors and stairs. So basically this was 2 stairway landings. I'm just going to go back from that and show you. What you're seeing right here is a stairway landing, and that landing was connected by 2 sets of stairs. And the stairs and the landings all needed to be mosaiced with this gold. But the building is also, it's under heavy construction. He's given us 3 months to complete it, though, which is a good thing. And then they're going to put the building on the market. So they're going to have people coming in and out of the building. And also, when something's under construction like this and you're going to be having to do an install, you want to make sure that you have the proper insurance. And I already had workman's comp for the year that I had purchased because of another project. But workman's comp is like $3,700 a year in New York. It's not inexpensive. And I'm an LLC, so I'm covered because I'm the owner of the company, or the CEO rather. And I also have a $4 million business insurance policy, so I'm able to bid on projects like this, and I don't have to worry about personal liability. But anyway, so the client rejects my first bid of $28,000, and that's just to do the labor. They're going to supply all the materials. That's just for our labor. He counters with $15,000, And I said, the only way I could do this is if I take what you've designed and cut it in half. So he says, okay, but you have to be here on site and I have to watch everything you do. So I decide I don't want this job. I don't want to do it. He's too controlling and it's too complicated and he's not going to pay us enough. And then he calls back and he says, you know, I will pay you more and you can do anything you want with the design. You can change it, you can simplify it, whatever. And I'll give you, I think he said 23,000. And I know a lot of us don't talk about money and how much we're getting paid for things, but I think it's something we should all talk about more, because I think that a lot of people underbid and then get in a lot of trouble. And I knew with this project that this was going to be a really tight budget and that we had a lot of work to do. But it was a very high-profile project that got quite a bit of press, and it was something that I felt would look really good on my resume. Plus, I was able to, like I said, rework his design, so I felt like I wasn't just executing someone else's project. And then he agreed to let us do all of it in our studio and then bring it to the site. And he offered to pay for our parking, our gas, our tolls, and even hotel rooms if we needed it. So things were going better. So we decided to take the project. So what I did is I took his design, which was twice as much as what you see here. So the yellow is where the mosaic is going to be sitting in the stone. And about this time, I went out to the fabricator, the marble fabricator out on Long Island, and they had no idea how they were going to actually incise the marble so that it was just deep enough for the tile to sit in. And because the small T is so hard to work with, it was expensive, the client got some tile from Italy that was basically, it was a gold tile that you'll see in a few minutes that is all flat. So it's kind of a glass, it's gold sandwiched between glass. And it was less expensive than the small T and really easy to cut and really easy to work with. So anyway, I went out to the fabricator, and the fabricator and I figured out how to take a wet jet and created a bit so that when they incised the marble, it would only be about 3/8 of an inch thick, the cut would be. So that way, but they'd never done something like that before. So this was kind of an experiment for them. And I realized that, so what I did is I did a test. So when they cut the marble, they incised it, and they laid this piece in place. This is one of the stair landings. So what I did is I came over and I looked at the marble, and this is the guy installing the stairs. So I took a look at the marble, the incisions, and they weren't great. There was a lot of there were quite a bit of problems with it as far as consistency, and I was nervous that I'm going back here for a minute, that what they'd cut out wasn't really the design. So what I did is I went back to the studio and I created one section of the mosaic. And the way I fabricated this was using tile tape. What you're seeing is the back of the mosaic, and the back is where you'll see the gold. So I fabricated just a small piece, and I laid the tiles face down on tile tape that was face up. So I did this one section, and then I brought it to lay it in, or actually that wasn't the actual section, but this is the section that I did the test in. That last picture, that's just one of the pieces that we did later. But anyway, so we created it like this in pieces. And then I came and I laid it into the marble and realized that it wasn't fitting, that the cuts weren't good. So, I went back to the client. I said, unfortunately, your marble, your wet jet cuts don't fit the design. And I had taken his CAD design and I had eliminated a lot of things using Illustrator. I'd taken the CAD drawing into Illustrator and just eliminated a lot of the points. And if you guys know how to use Illustrator, it really is helpful in situations like this because you can change points and move things around. So anyway, so once I did this, I realized that we had a big problem. And that problem was that the mosaic was not going to fit. If I used the CAD drawing, it was not going to fit into the floor. So what I proposed and what I did was, and this is the marble close-up too, lots and lots of problems. So what I said to the client was, okay, this is a disaster, and we need to rethink the entire project. So what I did is I came back with another bid to do an entire, basically a tracing or a rubbing of all the cuts as they existed. And I did that by taking tracing paper and just laying it over the floor and taking a graphite pencil and rubbing it along the edges to create this pattern that was accurate, because the pattern that I was going to be working with was the CAD drawing, which didn't match the cuts. So this is a good example of what do you do when a project goes really bad like that and you can't work with a drawing that doesn't match. And if any of you've ever done a backsplash or a shower or anything like that, and you're given dimensions, and then the mosaic, you bring it to put it in, and it either is too big or too small because they didn't give you the right dimensions. This is similar to that. Like, what do you do when the materials that the client gives you to work with don't match the mosaic that you think you're going to make? And that's why I always do a test before I spend 400 hours doing a mosaic. I don't want to be worried the whole time that it's going to go bad. So I do a little test, and that's what that 1 square foot piece was all about. So anyway, so I lay on all the stairs, I lay the tracing paper down, and I just tape it all together, and then I just start doing this rubbing. And the marble company actually ended up paying us a pretty big chunk of money for doing this because they had messed up. And they really wanted the project to go well because they were trying to build a relationship with the architect. So they ended up paying for all the extra time that we had to spend doing these tracings. Does everybody understand what I'm talking about? Anybody have any questions?
Makes sense.
Okay. All right. So this is another one. So once we get the tracings down, we brought them to the studio. We cut everything up into sections, and I basically put everything in these sections because I knew it was going to be hard to install it if the pieces were too big. So I basically got poster board. I got packs and packs of poster board. I just made these sections that fit into the size of a poster board, and we had, and then I just stacked them all up and brought them into the apartment, because the other issue was that the pieces couldn't be too big because we had to walk it up 6 flights of stairs, and it was a very narrow staircase, and the elevator for the building wasn't working yet. It was under construction. So we had to carry all these things up, like I said, this very narrow staircase. So if I had had big sections of mosaic trying to bring it up, it wouldn't have worked. So this actually ended up working really well. And the poster board, we could bend it to go around corners as we were walking it up. And we just stacked them right up on top of each other and brought them up the stairs. So this is one section, and there were hundreds of these sections. And then this is a picture of us taking those sections and putting them on the floor. And the way we also developed a way to install these, that was, because I was concerned, like, I didn't want to take a palette knife and have to like lay thin set into all these little pieces and these curves, so I spent quite a few nights up trying to figure out what on earth am I going to do to make this easy as possible. So we also did some tests, and when I use, for my thin set, I use Carabon Care Elastic for everything, and you can use it indoors, outdoors. And it's a dry and a wet mixture that you mix according to the package directions with a drill bit. And you mix it, you have a certain amount of mixing time, slaking time, and then drying time, which is, we followed exactly. But what we did do is we mixed it thinner than they suggested. And then what we did is we put it into like a plastic ketchup bottle. So it was thin, and we could squeeze out the thin set into these channels, and it worked great. And as we put the thin set into a channel, we would just flip over the section we were working on. We would flip it over and lay it into the channel. And then I always let my mosaics dry overnight before I pull off paper or tape. I don't like the hassle of trying to go back and fix pieces that come out. And usually it works fine. So I think like what you're seeing here, we laid it in one day, and the next day we came in, we just peeled the tape right off, and it was fine. So let's see, let's keep going. And this is a close-up, and you can see the tape on top of the tile. But the actual installation was pretty easy. It went very smoothly. I mean, there were a few pieces that didn't fit perfectly, and we would just, we would lay it in before we put the thin set in. We'd kind of lay in a section, see where any problems were, take it back up, remove a tile or two if it was too tight, or if a tile was like slightly bigger. But it was pretty accurate, and the rubbing that I made of the design of the floor was fairly accurate. And that's another close-up of it. And that's before the tape came off. And this is a picture of the stairs. We're laying the mosaics into the stairs, and the stairs, like I said, there's two sections, and you can kind of see we're doing it on our hands and knees, using knee pads the whole time. And we just worked our way down. And you can see what it looks like here. It's supposed to kind of look like the gold is like falling down the stairs. This is an image of one of the landings completed. And as you kind of see down the center between the two black posts, there is a wall of glass. And the architect designed this to basically, it was really cool how he designed it, because basically the glass, what you're seeing is the reflection in the glass of the mosaic. So it gives you this Rorschach type effect. So I thought it was really smart the way he did it. And that was one of the reasons we wanted to take the job, is because the architect had an amazing portfolio, and I was like, I want to work with that guy. So yeah, we didn't know much about him before we got started, but once we saw his portfolio, it was just stunning. He's done quite a few things around the world that are really cool. And that's another image of one of the landings. That's a close-up. And also, when once we peeled the tape up, we used a grout that is I use this grout. It's called Mosaic Ultra Color, and it really replaces sanded or non-sanded grout. It's basically, you use it for everything, and it worked really well. And what I did is I kind of matched the color of the floor. I wanted the grout to really just seamlessly blend in with the floor, so we matched the kind of middle gray. And the client was really happy. And they sold it before we even finished. They sold the condo, which was the point of doing it. So, yep, and that's the staircase going down. And there's more of the stairs. That's a close-up of the stairs. And by the way, this design, the architect basically took type, like script type, and just laid a lot of type together to come up with the first design. And then, like I said, I removed a lot of the points, but that's why you've got these really cool curves, and there's some very interesting swirls, but it's all type that he just blew up really big and then just laid all together. So design-wise, I thought it was really inventive and interesting. And there is one of the landings finished. And you can see the staircase on the right going upstairs. And one of the hardest things about this project was trying not to get any thin set or grout on these black lacquered walls, because they're this high shine lacquer. and we had to clean the walls all the time because every time we touched them with the bottom of our shoe or touched our elbow against it, they would scuff up. So that was challenging. And that you can see that's from the library looking into the hallway, and it was this coffered hallway. And that is looking through to the back of the apartment, and that's like a garden area in the back. And that is looking from the back door in the bedroom from there's like a little patio, and that's looking back into the gardens on Prince Street in Soho. And that's it. Any questions? That is the end. I'll go back to the beginning and put this up.
Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So I'd like to ask a couple of my own questions, but I want to remind everyone else who's on the call that if you'd like to ask any questions, you can type them into the chat box and I will translate them to Kathleen, and then she can give us her answers. So take a minute to think about what you'd like to know. I think she's probably open to technical questions as well as philosophical ones. And I have a couple of each. So maybe I could just start by saying I really appreciate you sharing the trials and tribulations of the process and not just the beautiful finished product. And I'm curious to know, when it comes to the original contract that you wrote out and you signed, did you have language in there about contingencies and about what would happen if there had to be a change, or was that just something that you had to negotiate when it happened?
Well, when you work with architecture firms like this, they have a contract. And what you do is you look at the contract and you get your lawyer to look at the contract and say, what should I do? And my lawyer basically said, we need to add this. We struck some things out. And then basically my lawyer and their lawyer talked for maybe 2 or 3 days before we hammered everything out. But, most of the time I don't have to do that. But this was an Israeli company, and they are worldwide, and they have ways they do business. And I don't want to get stuck. And that's why I do have a really good attorney who helps me with contracts occasionally. And I try not to do it too much. I don't really do it much with, I don't hire her to do any residential stuff, but I do have a basic contract that I put together. And it just depends. It depends on the job. But I usually spell out in my bid that if this is my understanding of the project, and this is my bid, and I think Emily, you've taken one of my workshops with me, I do everything in a spreadsheet, and I show how much everything's going to cost, and I show how many square feet we need, how many square feet we're going to mosaic, my labor cost. And basically I say, if anything changes from what is on this spreadsheet and the size changes or your drawings are not accurate, we're working basically hourly after that. And I give them an hourly rate. So
that's great. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
And so speaking of square footage, we have a question from Rhonda. She's wondering how many square feet of mosaic work were there in the stairway? And did you figure your initial price by the square foot or the number of days of fabrication and installation?
I can't remember exactly how many square feet it was, but the thing is that because I was not mosaicing an entire area, we were just mosaicing parts of it. It was hard to kind of calculate what the square feet were. Although the architect had sort of calculated it, but like I said, we cut that in half. So I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly what it was. This was done like in 2015, maybe 2016. So it's been a few years, and I don't have that number in front of me. Sorry.
Yeah, and I did take that class with you, and I remember that you have a lot of different factors that go into your bids. It's not simply square footage, and it's a lot of other factors too.
Yeah.
So I have a question from Karen. Did you get to meet the buyers?
I did. It's an actor, actually, and I'm not really supposed to say who it is, but there were quite a few people that came up there. I mean, it was a very expensive apartment, but yes, I did get to meet them. And I've been trying to get back up there with a professional architectural photographer to take more pictures, but they're very private and they don't want anybody taking pictures. But I did have to go back in after they moved in because the piano mover dropped the piano on the floor.
Oh.
So they paid me to go in, and I just had to fix like a little section. It was not that big of a deal, but they paid me, if, and I always say if there's anything that happens to the Mosaic after we leave that, is the client's fault, and they have to pay us hourly to come back and do it. So, and they were very cool about it. So, yeah, I mean, when people move and you've done a floor, it's very hard to not, especially when it's something like this, it's hard not to damage it.
Yeah. So as far as photography, your photos are beautiful, and you mentioned that there was some press that happened around the project. So I was wondering who took those photos or the photos that were used for any of the press coverage, and did that bring you additional work?
Yes. Well, you're not gonna believe this, but all these photos were taken with my iPhone.
Well done.
And the architect used my photos to market the apartment as well as for his press. And he won an award for this. I can't even remember what it was, but it was like an architectural award for his firm. But he used all my photos. And yeah, but I take everything with my iPhone, and I'm sure they could be a lot better, but usually by the time I'm finished with an architectural project, people are just kicking you out the door. And that's why I make sure that while I'm working, I take a ton of pictures. And as soon as the project's over, I take a ton of pictures before I walk out the door, because you don't know when you're going to get back in. You really don't. And it's really it's tough. And when you're doing a project like this, where it's a private client and they're very, they're extremely nervous about press and about, everything, you just can't. I don't know. Honestly, the person who bought it is a Russian actor. And that's all I can tell you.
Huh.
Yeah.
So we got to hear a lot about your about the trip ups and the challenges along the way, but what was your favorite part about this project?
I really loved when I laid the mosaic into the channels and they fit perfectly. That was like, yes, because, I was concerned that having to make these templates, these new drawings using tracing paper and a graphite pen, I use like a graphite stick. I was like, oh my gosh, I hope this works. I just hope it works. But when I was growing up, I lived in Europe. My dad was in the service, and my parents were really into brass rubbings. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but it's basically you take paper and you lay it over, and a lot of times they're in churches all over Europe. There are these beautiful brass tops on top of a crypt, and it might be like, they've done like these knights and kings and queens. So they would lay the paper over, and then they'd take different color graphite and they would rub it, and you would get an impression of that. And that's what I thought of when I saw the issue. I said, why can't I do it like a brass rubbing and just rub the edges of the channel, and it'll work. It should work. And well, thankfully it did, but I called my parents and said, thank you for making me do this when I was a kid.
So I want to give one more reminder to everyone to ask questions. Okay, good. There's one more, and as you ask your questions, I know I only have one more, but it's a good wrap up one. So the question here is, can you please repeat the name of the gold tile? You said it's not smalty. She said they're gorgeous.
No, it's an Italian tile. The client got it. I don't know the name of it. He just purchased it. He had his own supplier, but it's a glass tile. It's basically two pieces of glass with gold sandwiched between it. But I don't know where he got it. I don't know the name of the manufacturer. They just gave it to me.
Okay. Karen says thanks.
Sorry.
So So my question, perhaps it'll be the last unless someone asks more, but I know that when I finish a project, any project, I get oohs and ahs from people around me who haven't seen the process happen, but I know that all I can see are the tiny mistakes everywhere in it. But my projects are not high end like this. And so I'm wondering, on something that you worked so carefully on and you really spent, um, that it was precision work. Did you still have that experience? Do you walk away and see the mistakes, or do you walk away and see the?
Absolutely, absolutely. I saw the mistakes, and I was really surprised at how well the grout hid them all, though.
Mm,
Once I grouted it, all the things that were just screaming to me, at me, that angle that is supposed to be curved, but like it's not curving right. And then once I grouted it, I didn't see all those problems. But yeah, I think that whenever I finish a job, I'm always like really freaked out about some little issue. But I find that a lot of clients are not really familiar with Mosaic, and they haven't done a lot of Mosaic, so they're always really happy when it's finished, because they were like, wow, I've never made a Mosaic, I've never had a Mosaic in my house or my business, or so they're always really excited. And I have to just kind of pull back and say, you know what, they're happy, that's all that matters. Because
mhm.
I sometimes can get kind of crazy with repairs and going back and reworking things. So I try to calm down. And I think the longer I've been doing this, the more I'm able to step back and say, they like it, that's all that matters.
Yeah. Well, it's good for me to hear that I'm not the only one who feels that way at the end of a project.
Well, every project too, is it what, people always say, what's my style? I'm whatever style my client wants to have, because I find that, and I like doing really graphic things like this, and I do a lot of typography, so I get hired to do a lot of that type of thing.
Mhm.
But I think that, I've done all different types of things that are supposed to look like a child's drawing, so I, sometimes I'm like, it doesn't look right, but you have to look at what are they trying to achieve, and what is the project supposed to be, what is it supposed to look like, and just kind of step back and say, this is supposed to look like an elegant ballroom floor, and that's what it looks like. So, and if you get too bogged down in all the little details, the other thing too that I find is that whenever I see a mosaic that's like an ancient mosaic or some high-end mosaic on a floor in a hotel or something like that, I look at it really closely and I realize there's a lot of mistakes in it and it's not perfect. And I do, I look at the subway mosaics all the time in New York City. There's a lot of little things that aren't perfect, but that's what makes it really cool, because it's handmade and it's not supposed to be perfect.
That's a good reminder. All
Yeah.
right. Well, I have asked all of my questions, and it seems the group has asked theirs. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I don't know, Amy, if you wanted to do any official wrap up, but Kathleen, from me, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you, Kathleen. It was great. As I mentioned before, we were recording this, and it will be available on the website sometime in the near future. Thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome. Bye.